go ahead and get started if we could. Okay, we'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then
Well, it won't come up on the screen up there.
Okay. So
Let's see if they remember it.
Yeah, see if you remember it. Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child and one community at a time, through service to others. And our invocation, Caleb?
For Jesus Christ, our God, you set apart for me, you do nothing, and faithfully embrace your words, Lord, and preach your goodness. Help us to carry out the works of our mission and be with the children and families who endeavor to help, defend them against the assault of the enemy and break in peace. We thank you for these earthly gifts, and as you bless the 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed the multitudes, also bless these gifts and increase them for the hungry in our world. We give glory, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you. Okay. Announcements, we've got a couple of them. Everybody gets seated again. Just one thing about the library, our plans are to go back there, the first meeting in August. Please be aware that at this point we're not sure with the county moving into the orange status. We want to make sure that we can still get in there. I talked to them today and they weren't sure. So we'll have to find out from them. So be aware, we'll be sending out an email once we know. If you know people that don't have email or are not reading them, please contact them and let them know that if we change locations. Guests, we do have some guests today. Jerry, you got a guest?
David Ross, member of the church, professor of the college. He's the guy who taught me astrophysics course that I wanted to ask all before this. We knew that he would be interested in something else. David, welcome.
Thanks. All right, David. Thank you. Thanks. Nice to meet you, David.
Galen.
Caleb?
Galen. G-A-L-E-N.
Oh, Galen. Okay. G-A-L-E-N.
G-A-L-E-N.
Gotcha.
That's all right.
Call me anything as long as you don't call me late for supper.
So how can I help?
There you go. That's right. That's right. I want to thank Bud and Carolyn for being our greeters today. They did a tremendous job. Congratulations, Bud and Carolyn. Thank you. And let's see here. Oh, indicators and greeters. Let's get these things filled up, everybody. We need some more indicators and greeters, and we also need monthly speaker coordinators. So let's pass those around.
With the indicators, I was supposed to do it last week, and then I was supposed to do it this week, and I still have my burners.
Okay, so we'll put it on there.
I don't know what's going on because I've gotten a message from Forward.
Okay, well, we'll check it and make sure you're on there. Okay? Good. Let's see. Okay, the other thing, remember, while we're here and we've got the use of this facility, it's a great facility. We've been able to use it for the last few months. Remember to drop $1 or $2 in the container over there for Masonic Cornerstone. They're still trying to raise money to get everything fixed on this building, and it's just fantastic what they're doing here. So don't forget to drop $1 or $2 in there and get that going. I did see a new video that came out from the Indiana District of Kiwanis, and just wanted to present that today. Jerry. You know, I was always, or have been, wondering myself, you know, if somebody comes up to you and asks, what is Kiwanis? What do you tell them? Anybody?
It's a service organization dedicated to, just what the mission statement says.
Yeah, exactly. What we say in our initial mission statement. And I think that's what we need to be doing. A lot of times we tell people, oh, well, we have Pancake Day and, we held the bazaar and we do this and that. But really, if you talk about it, it is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world one child and one community at a time. And that's what we need to tell people. And that's how we need to get people involved in Kiwanis. We do need to get more people involved, and Caleb is working on that right now. Caleb's got in charge of the satellite members that we're working with. Caleb, you want to talk about a little bit about what went on this past week and where we're going next?
Yes, because I'm asking all of you for something too. So we had basically just Karen and I as existing members, but we had 3 prospects who are going to join. So we already doubled what our first meeting was. We met on Thursday, just kind of went over what Kiwanis is, what we're trying to do, and then basically just talked about what kind of service projects additionally and what we're currently doing, what can we add. It sounds like school supplies this year, not only because of just the cost of inflation and people not working as much or not getting paid as much right now. School supplies are going to be in dire need this year, more so than most other years. And that's going to be at every school. So rather than trying to get a little bit for every school, we decided to focus on Summer Elementary. We are going to try and raise $500 to get supplies for that school, and then we've got an approval from the board to match up to $500 whatever we raise as members or as business owners, anything like that. So those of us who can give, please give. Talk to me or talk to Gary about that. We're trying to raise $500 from the club out of our own pockets, and then whatever we can get up to $500, we're going to match that from some existing funds of the large bar draft we saw a couple weeks ago, the surplus that we've got in the service fund. So hopefully if we can get $1,000 to the kids there, that would greatly help, and then that's the springboard for what we're going to hope to have as a more of like the toy operation drive. We do that at winter break, we do that at summer break, see if we can't really start to get some more school supplies sent to the kids. And then we also talked about one other one that's more of a fun thing for some of the kids. I'll have some more information about that, but so far, so good. And I know we've got a couple more members coming. Our next one is going to be on Tuesday. Some people can't meet on Thursdays, so we decided to kind of go back and forth. So this coming Tuesday at Cranston Mountain again, it's the only place that's open, from 5:30 to 6:30, come out if you want to. We're going to have a few more, and we're going to continue that same discussion.
Great, Caleb. It's amazing. I've been standing up here for almost a year, and they've met once and come up with a service project already. It's been hard, when I ask people here for what kind of service projects we can do, very difficult to get those ideas, but I'm glad that the new members are getting those ideas and helping us. Just because they are doing it as the satellite members doesn't mean we can't be involved or you can't be involved. So remember that. The challenge is to the whole club. We come up with $500 from the members, then the club will match that $500 for school supplies this year. So let's get it done, okay? Caleb's going to be putting out an email or a letter to each member to try to raise that $500. So let's get that done so we can fill that closet of school supplies for the kids at Summer Elementary, okay? As far as volunteer opportunities, we will be packing backpacks for the Nourish Summer program on July 26th. I think we're okay with the number of people we have, so we're in good shape there. We have been asked by Nourish to continue with unloading the truck. We're going to do that August 13th. We do need more people for that. We do need at least 4 more people for that. Mac, I've got you down, and I know a couple others I've got down, but we need at least 4 more people. It's at 9 a.m. on August 13th. We're participating in Tri-Kappa Summer Lunch Program on July 27th. We've got enough people for that, although we thought we lost one this week on July 20th because we had an incident delivering and Conrad over there is glad to be here because he got attacked by a pit bull. And so we've got to be careful in doing those, but thanks for doing that. Luckily Conrad's okay. This pit bull was supposed to be in the house and obviously came out with the kid and wasn't too happy in seeing Conrad carry McDonald's sandwiches, Happy Meals to the house. So I don't know if he wanted the Happy Meals or Conrad. You know, so, but we did get through that. Pop can tabs. We're up to a little over 400,000. We're collecting still for Riley. Dave Michael brought some today, and we've got some others, so let's keep that going. I put out something on Facebook last night or this morning, but trying to get up to 500,000. We've got 400,000. And oh, by the way, the guy that challenged us, he's from northern Indiana, and I talked to him the other day, and I says, Denny, I says, how many do you have? He says, oh, I got almost 10,000. And I says, Denny, that's nothing. He says, that's quite a bit. And I said, well, you know, our club, we've got over 400,000. And Denny almost had a heart attack. But, you know, hey, let's keep them going. I want to get pictures of us walking into that meeting on September 7th with 500,000 pop tabs for Ronald McDonald House at Riley. So let's keep them going. I appreciate it. Let's collect all we can. Ask all your friends and your family and your enemies and everybody to let's get pop tabs, okay? August 10th. Put this in your date book. We'll be having a lot of emails and a lot of Facebook updates about this. But August 10th, Dairy Queen is doing a fundraiser for us. So from 4 to 9 p.m. Karen's not here today, but she worked it out to arrange. We'll get 15% of all sales that night from 4 to 9 p.m. So make sure you're planning to go to Dairy Queen on August 10th. That's a Tuesday, I believe. So, you know, let's plan on it, okay? We want to try to use that as another fundraiser. The board has kind of decided to go with some of those smaller type fundraisers to go along with our large McDonald's fundraiser we had this year. So let's keep those going. Member updates. Any other member updates? How's Rusty?
Rusty's doing fine. He felt so good the day after surgery that he was ready to start getting back to usual. But,
Well,
you know, usually after you get off the surgery, you're still loaded up with medicine.
yeah.
So I haven't talked to him since then. It's really improved.
Okay. Good. Again, let's get invites to the meetings. We've got tell someone about our meetings. Let's get people to join us. Operation Toy Box. We do need a bunch of volunteers to help with that. So let me know who's available for that. We don't have dates on putting everything together, but we've got a somewhat schedule on what we need to do and approximately when we need to do it. So Dave Long is going to help us with that again. And so let's keep that going so we can get those toys to those children that need it. Indiana District Convention is going to be held August 7th. There's 3 of us that are attending. We'd like to have a lot more. We do need a couple more delegates, or we need at least one more delegate. So if anybody can attend, please let us know. It's just that one day. It's an all-day event in Carmel, so if you can attend, let me know. Let's get that signed up. Okay. Kiwanis birthdays this week. Let's see, we got, Dave Long. Happy birthday, Dave.
Thank you.
July 26th. Happy birthday.
I hope I make it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. We'll get there. Before we cover the history, I wanted to cover national days. Today is National, I don't know how to pronounce this, P-E-N-U-C-H-E, Penuche Fudge Day. Whatever that is, but it sounded good. So it's also National Hammock Day, and it's National Rat Catcher's Day. So you all go out and catch a rat, okay? Because it ended there, I thought I had to go on to tomorrow, because tomorrow's National Vanilla Ice Cream Day. So we may change that to August 10th this year, so it's National Vanilla Ice Cream Day. And it's also, for all the ladies in here, it's July 23rd is Gorgeous Grandma Day. So make sure you take care of Gorgeous Grandma tomorrow. Happy Bucks. Who's happy? It's Pam's Promises. It's going to this quarter. They're a nonprofit transitional housing program offering a variety of support services for Montgomery County homeless men, women, and their children, and a goal of helping clients become self-sufficient within 3 to 6 months. So, who's happy today? Chuck. Chuck must have got some license plates.
I'm happy. Dennis Cruz brought me 4 license plates. They're not old ones to take care of, but I get old ones, I keep the new ones. He brought me 5.
Oh, jeez.
Hey.
Let's get another buck out.
Yeah.
Good, thank you, Chuck. Caleb.
I'm happy that we've got 3 new members, and so since I don't have a 50 on me, that's my pledge for the drive to get everybody started. So
Good, thank you. All right, let's put that down. Anybody else? Matt?
Tuesday, I shot my age, and then the next day, I shot what I hope will be my age when I'm 85.
Good job. Charlotte?
Just happy to be here and support grandfathers.
There you go. There you go. That's
I'm happy to say that another great 4-H year is underway and all practically done because they're removing the animals, I think, this evening or tomorrow.
right.
I should say it was actually the Headley Broadwater Megan Boozer show because they took in all the awards, I think. They just did a great job. And if you didn't get out there, the youth in this community are talented, hardworking, and there were some great kids out there. It was wonderful. So we're going to stay with it.
Good. Good. Go, Jerry.
Just because I can.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll throw 5 in for the, my brother went through surgery well, so we're happy with that. I was able to come back, so, and for everybody here, I'll throw the 5 in, and I'll match Caleb's 50 for the school supplies. Okay, so let's get that on. History. And since we have a special day today, we thought we'd talk about history. 1951, July 22nd, today. It's the first Soviet rocket flight with animals. Okay, since you two are the geeks with that, what were the dog's name? Okay. Dizek and Zagan were their names. Okay. 1963, July 22nd. July 22nd must have been a big day for space. Conference on Space Cabin Ecology. It's 1963, so think about this, you know. In 2 to 3 years, it says, the USSR expects to orbit spacecraft of 78 to 80 tons, which will be assembled in Earth orbit to produce larger spacecraft. These will not only fly around the moon, but also be used to fly to Venus, Mars, and other planets. Although it will take years, many technical problems have to be solved before such a spacecraft can be built. How to shield the crew from radiation, how best to regenerate the air, how to recycle the water. Can the crew survive for long flights in zero-G, or must some form of artificial gravity be provided? If so, what's the best method? How can the psychological health of the crew best be maintained on long flights? I guess they got that all figured out by now, right? It looks like it. I mean, they're doing all of this stuff up there, so great. 1969, July 22nd, today, Apollo 11 heads back to Earth. What was Apollo 11? What was the big one about that? Right. After astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first human to walk on the moon 2 days later. 1998, astronaut Alan Shepard died at age of 74. 2012, Russia launched the Soyuz rocket with different satellites, including a Canadian communication satellite, a German technology satellite, a Russian climate satellite, and 2 Russian satellites for civilian surveillance. So they're up there watching you, so you better be careful. And 2021, July 22nd, Dr. Kathleen Howell presents to the Crawfordsville Kiwanis Club. So that's going to go into the history books, right? So thank you all. And Jerry, you want to come on up and do an introduction?
Those of you who know me know that I've been a self-avowed space geek forever. So I had the opportunity, I was told that Dr. Howell spoke to the Lafayette Club back earlier in the spring, and that it was a very interesting program. I thought, wow, that's a great idea for a program. So I sent her an email, and I told her it wasn't even necessary for her to drive down here. We were still meeting by Zoom at the time. And so I said, you don't even have to leave West Lafayette. And she said she would speak. Well, when we started meeting face to face, I'm thinking, gosh, I told her she didn't have to come. And so I sent her another email, and she said she would be happy to drive down. And I think the presentation will be much more entertaining. Dr. Howell is the Shu Low Distinguished Professor of Astronautics and Aeronautics in the College of Engineering at Purdue University. That means she's a real rocket scientist. She holds a BS from Iowa State and a master's and a doctorate from Stanford, which means she's a smart rocket scientist. Her technical field is astrodynamics in support of spacecraft moving throughout the solar system. And so that's, I think, what her presentation is going to be about. I've been looking forward to this for 4 months. Without further ado, Dr. Howell.
Okay. Thank you all very much, Jerry, for the invitation and the opportunity to come. Of course, in our current situation, please let me know if you can't hear me or if I need to, be better at articulating what I'm saying. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about just space activities in general and how we're undergoing a revolution. So next, please. So when we first started, like in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, when you talked about the space enterprise, you really were talking about the overlapping of these 3 different kinds of activities. Most of us are more familiar with the science and exploration piece, using spacecraft in order to learn things, go places. But there was also a key part of the economic picture. That's actually the one that's changing the most right now. And then there is also a piece called planetary protection. Now, planetary protection includes things like, the military and the Space Command, but it also includes, pieces like protecting the Earth from asteroids, where we may need sentinel satellites. It means protecting the Earth from those kinds of things as well. So it's about Earth protection. It's also got a really big component whenever we go to another world like the moon and bring things back. There's a whole infrastructure that has to take care of that and be sure that we don't contaminate the Earth. And we don't want to contaminate other bodies with things from Earth. So that's a big piece of what's going on. Next. So, starting in those 50s and 60s, as you were alluding to, we actually started evolving they're not going to do something, somebody else is. So it's a change in all of these relationships as we go forward, whether that's onto the moon or out to the solar system. Next. For example, this is a picture of a satellite from India that it did have some trouble. It was trying to land on the moon in 2019, but India already has their own satellite in orbit around Mars. Admittedly, the U.S. helped them to accomplish that, but they have a very aggressive program and they have a very aggressive view of what they're going to do in the space arena. And Israel also, for example, has recently developed their own satellites and launched them, and a lot of other countries are participating. Not all of them necessarily have their own companies but part of their goals with their own equivalent organizations like NASA is to participate in the changes that are now taking place. Next. So basically, we have the entire world thinking about expanding out into space and making that part of our normal activities. The U.S. is initially planning to be back on the moon by 24. That may slip a little bit, but that's what their goals are. China wants to have people on the moon by in the 30s. And all of this is actually dropping in cost, if you can believe that, but it truly is. So the first key thing that's happening for the next 50 years is the world's views are changing and they are becoming participants. Next. The second thing is the private sector. So really, the private sector has now come of age. So the private sector is really getting involved. And you'll notice that up until 2009, basically everything that was happening was government. NASA, Pentagon, it was all government programs that were enabling all these activities. But it has changed. In the last decade, it's changed tremendously because it's not all governments now. It now has a lot of private enterprise also investing. You'll notice that number there, and I'm going to want you to remember it because we're going to come back to it. $2 billion a year in 2019 in the space economic activity. So the private sector, everybody can debate whether the private sector is better or less or whatever, but it's there, and it's happening, and the NASA and the Pentagon are encouraging the activities by the private sector in developing the space economy. That's a significant change, and that's how we move into the next phase. Next. SpaceX is one of the big companies that you may have heard about. That actually over on the right is the SpaceX Starship that they're developing and building in order to actually get humans to Mars. They can also move to the moon. And right now, the SpaceX launchers, the Falcon 9, is actually enabling a lot of the launches even for government satellites. So they've now gone into that really in a big way, and they're one of the major players in this arena. Next. Blue Origin is another really big player. That's Jeff Bezos. And maybe you heard Jeff Bezos just got back in space. Yeah, if you didn't hear, I mean, it's not for his lack of trying, right? So that's their concept of a vehicle that's going to land on the moon. They have both SpaceX and Blue Origin have also taken over part of Cape Canaveral, or down in Florida. They have their own launch sites there now, and they are developing yet another one. So that's all theirs, and they launch from there, and that's what they do. So these are probably a couple of the big companies. Virgin Galactic, that's where Richard Branson launched from. That was last week. Some of you heard about that. And because his company is really interested in launching satellites to space, but their concept is different. So rather than launching off the launch pad, they take an aircraft up and then launch from under the aircraft in order to get up there. And they have New Mexico Spaceport is where it all happens. They've got They're planning tourist trips right now. A ticket is $250,000, so not on my schedule. But clearly, Richard Branson is okay with that. But they're hoping over time to bring that down. Now, if they could actually get that work, the commercial market for them says that they could get from their spaceports in New Mexico to New York in 15 minutes. So if that can happen, that's something that they're looking forward to. So that would really change, the commercial air industry. Now, okay, so how do we view all of this and put all of these pieces together? The important note on this slide is the difference between what we thought about in the first 50 years, which was, let's just get out there, wave, and come home. The next 50 years, what we're all thinking about, and what's going to build that economic base, is the fact that we're going to go out there and we're going to stay there. So a lot of the research and development that's going on is how do you enable that? How do you make it so that's just part of our normal life? And also planning for, and those of us in the educational world are thinking about developing the capabilities for the future generation of workers, some of which will go there, live there, and work there. So how do we make all of those kinds of things happen? And that's what we've been looking at a lot, and the bottom part is just Purdue has an initiative that we're trying to enable all of this. Now, in order to think about where is there, so I thought I'd give some definitions. So there on the left is the Earth. That's called near-Earth space. That's the space right around the Earth. Next. Anything that we do in near-Earth space is really in what we call the Earth neighborhood. That's where a lot of the satellites are now. That's where a lot of low Earth orbit vehicles are. But the guy on the right there is the moon. And so that's the moon in its orbit. And if we think about that term Cislunar, which is being used a lot more these days, is actually that entire region is that entire region within the moon's orbit. So that's our current target for the expansion of activities, expansion of where we put our vehicles. And that's the neighborhood that we're targeting to live and work in. That entire region between the Earth and the moon. Next. And so then if we go beyond that, we're looking at translunar. Okay. So as we move out of the frontier phase and we're moving into the next phase is that commerce phase. That's what all these private companies are in the game for. That's the phase that we're moving into next. And that builds on what we've done so far. So thinking about all that frontier information got us to really developing this near-Earth environment, and that's where we are. That first guy up there is called the A-train. That's where a lot of satellites from different countries are in the same orbit, collecting data and getting all of the information. It's just an example of something that we've developed in this near-Earth environment. Next. There's a whole bunch of other things that we do very routinely in this environment, and you see there are a lot of satellites that we all depend on. Over on the right, the only reason I put that in is because if you see all these black dots over there, they all represent individual satellites that are currently up there, currently operating from lots of places around the world. And if you take anything away from that picture, it should be, that's really crowded. And it's very crowded. And right now, there are not very, there's kind of informal agreements on how you get a spot there, particular countries, particular companies, and so on. But it's really very crowded because we've developed all that capability in near-Earth space. Next. And so the other thing that's happened in the last decade is completely disrupted how we even operate in that space as we're thinking about moving out, and that's been the CubeSat revolution. That is shifted our focus a lot because we can do so much with them for very inexpensive opportunities for for running them. And the number of new companies that have emerged in order to leverage that cheap capability and further develop this near Earth space is amazing. Since 2011, the number of new companies that have entered based on this kind of capability is really amazing. So I brought one just so people get a sense of how big it is. This is actually large. It's a little bit larger than it truly may be, simply because it's got some plexiglass around it because we use it for teaching. But what you're going to see in there, some of you want to come up and see it a little bit later, is the engineering functions that are associated with that, and they come prepackaged, so anybody can do it. The empty space in there is really the space that would be for a payload. We teach about the engineering functions, so we don't have a payload in there right now. But you put a payload in there, and that's what you got. Around the Earth, you put a whole bunch of them up there, you can do amazing things. Very inexpensive, because the engineering pieces come prepackaged. We've got an elementary school in Lafayette that wanted to build their CubeSat. As long as you can get somebody to launch it for you, you can do a lot of things. That means that there's been this huge growth in the last 10 years of a lot of companies that you never heard of. Those are a few, but there's a lot of other companies who are, oh, we'll launch it for you. So there's been a lot of companies that started up saying, we want to launch all these guys and help actually, anybody who wants one can now build one, and if you can get a launch agreement, you can put it up. Okay, so they built capacity in this near-Earth region. They tend to work as secondary payloads, so they need people like me because they are added onto another satellite. So it's also been a huge change to say we no longer have dedicated launches. We have a main satellite, but then the same launch vehicle can carry a lot of additional ones like those. And they just drop them off. And then these little guys find their way to wherever we want them to be in space. So they use a lot of cloud storage, they use a lot of web tools, but in the last decade then it's shifted us from an industry where a company has to do everything to sort of an upstream, downstream concept, which is key to the business world. The upstream is the companies who build the satellites, launch them, get all the data and so on, and downstream are the users. So the users these days are lots of folks who may want information. Currently though, this is an industry that's developing, so there's many challenges. For example, right now there's not a lot of regulations. Enter the Department of Commerce, but anyway. There are no international agreements. So you get a whole bunch of those really little guys up there, and you've got some problems with debris. You've also got the manufacturing of these is also, coming online. There's some problems with that I'll talk about in a minute. And we've got a lot more satellites that we have to track and things like that. So there are some challenges. Currently, the FAA, which you're all familiar with, for example, keeps track of airlines and keeps everybody from colliding, and everybody agrees on the rules of the road and so on. We have no such organization for our spacecraft right now. And so even if we start launching more of them, it's not necessarily true that we have a set of international agreements to manage all that. Not surprising, as this industry is just coming up. Next. However, we've all come to depend on the satellites, not only the little guys, but the medium-sized satellites and the larger ones. We've come to depend on them for a lot of our commercial activities. All of you are familiar with weather and climate forecasting, which is, we use a lot of satellites for that. Agriculture depends on them heavily these days. Disaster management is also, particularly in some areas of the world that may not be as sophisticated as for disaster management as we are in the States. Don't know how many people realize that we now track wildlife migration using from satellites. We also do a lot of monitoring, especially for oil. Next. We've got maritime security, now depends on these kinds of satellites. Even optimizing your insurance rates sometimes depends on some of the data that comes down from the satellites. Here I've got food commodities trading, but of course, that's related in a way to just the agriculture itself. And clearly hurricanes are a really big thing, and just lately Cygnus was actually launched in order to go up there, get inside hurricanes and understand them a lot better. So we've used the development in the near space in order to really get all of those things put together. So as now we want to move from this near space and we want to expand out into that Cislunar region, what we're talking about is the next stage in the evolution of our enterprise. We're talking about moving from just getting the new frontier to actually developing this space commerce model and how that's going to work in the coming decades. Along with that is that we need to develop an infrastructure. Now, space infrastructure is the kinds of things that you're familiar with, just what we have here on Earth. So right now, when I send up any of these satellites, they have to take care of everything themselves. They have to carry their own power, their own comm, their own propellant. They carry everything themselves. As we're going to start to move away from that near space and we get out into this larger region, it's no different than when we move to a new city. When you move to a new city, you expect the power company to be there. You expect any communications that you need to be there. We're going to have to do the same thing for satellites. So we're going to have an infrastructure out there, which we have started, so that there can be a facility maybe that new satellites can go up, can plug into, and can get the power that they need. They may be up there, be able to go in and get the communications that they need, so they can focus on whatever their goals are. And once you can do that, that will also bring down the cost. So you're going to have more capabilities that way, and especially as we move out further from the Earth, where we're not going to either be able to communicate instantly or come back and forth. So that's the stage that we're currently at. Next. Okay, so again, you can probably go fast through this. Next. So the first thing that we're looking at, that I'm working on, is we need a transportation network. So in other words, in order to do all those kinds of things, what are the roads? How do you move through this region? Next. And there are companies and the Department of Commerce that are also involved in trying to facilitate that. Here you've got a little example of another piece of infrastructure. So you've got a satellite up there doing whatever it's doing. It's got some experiments on there. Just from the looks of it, they're getting some science data that they may be passing down that might look a little similar to some moisture data in the soil. But over here on the right, you've got a service satellite. That means that part of that infrastructure is, I don't want to launch a new satellite. This one, though, needs some servicing. It has some pieces that need to be replaced. It may need more propellant or whatever. And so there's a whole new set of companies that are thinking about, we'll be the servicing folks. We'll be the ones that go up and fix your satellite. If you can service the satellites, also brings the cost down. And that's happening around the world. So every place around the world, these are just some examples, they're looking at their strategy in order to support that commerce development. Yep. Next. And when we think of, these are just some examples, you may not be able to see them real well. But we're looking at what do we have to put up there so we can essentially, from the engineering side, what do we need up there so now throughout this whole region between the Earth and the Moon, we can actually support the development of all the commerce, the types of infrastructure that we need. So right now, that's part of what they're looking at. And this isn't just for commerce, actually. It will also support the human expansion. So it also supports that kind of capability in order to make this overall less expensive in order to actually achieve all that we want to achieve. And to do that, there's also a lot of government industry partnerships, and that's a really big arrangement right now. Next. These are the kinds of things that we're working on right now. As noted, we need that transportation. We need the ability to service satellites. We need standardization. So when satellites from two companies both want to plug into the facility that gives them power, what are the common interfaces so they can do that? That is not a trivial exercise, as it turns out. We need a way to store propellant. The gas station's up there right now, so fuel depots are a hot topic. We need to collect, store, distribute energy, materials processing and manufacturing. So manufacturing in space is a big deal. And how do we do that? Bringing everything from the gravity well of the Earth up is inefficient and not cost effective. So how do you manufacture it? Next. This is a concept from a company, United Launch and Alliance, on if you have all those infrastructures in place, what might it look like? So you can see the Earth there, and you can just see all kinds of lines out there. But those lines are representing a concept for how do you put all of these elements in place. So then the users, be they a company that wants to collect data to give to counties and states, you know, for planning, versus some other companies want to do some other things. So how does that actually look like? So that's a little bit of an idea. I know we're running out of time. Yeah. Go forward. Keep going. Skip some things here. And then we're going to move then, once we have this infrastructure in place, it's also being thought about from the perspective of then we want to jump off and go to other places. So in that little map we had, next, over there on the right, that little map also included, that's the little node that said, okay, this is the spot from which we will go to other places, be they Mars, be there other locations in the solar system that we want to meet. Yes? Okay, and there's some other things that we can do in the translunar realm that is supported by everything we're doing in this current expansion. Yep. This is not just us. This is working with, those are all space organizations from around the world. They always get together every 2 years and look at the global roadmap. All of the, from the engineering side, these are all of the capabilities that we need in order to support some of the other activities. Next. Okay, we can skip through these because I know we're late. So this is just an idea of where we're at. Stage 1 is where we were in the last decade. Stage 2. Next. That this is where we are in the current decade, and doing that expansion out to the moon, and later on the last one will be the expansion to Mars. Okay, keep going. Okay, these are just pictures of what some of the things look like. So here is our overlap once again. And in recent times, some of the terminology has changed. Next. So for example, science and exploration, we now talk about it in terms of research and development, R&D. The global economy is just the space economy, and really planetary protection has been defense. So I put that up there for this following slide. Next. Click. Okay, on the commerce section, remember I told you to remember that $2 billion. Well, Bank of America has done some projections right now in what date was that? I think that was in 2020. The estimate was that within 10 years it would be a $1.4 trillion industry. So commerce is a key piece. Next, R&D. That is that the R&D, all of the developments that we have to do, and I work in the engineering sector, so all of the engineering sector needs a broad range of people from a lot of different backgrounds to all work together. Next. In the defense, you know, this is from the 1890s, but really it was the argument at the time that once you developed commercial shipping, then you needed a navy. The same is true now. Once we're expanding out in this cislunar regime, that is why the Space Force was put together. We can argue whether it should be a separate unit under the U.S. Space Command, but the goal is that once we've got all these kinds of assets out there in something, they have to be protected. So if we put all these pieces together, one of the key elements of all of this is like any development, any changes that we have in technology and in new industry that are born, it's all going to depend on the workforce. So we focus a lot, especially as an educational institution, we focus a lot on all of these need a workforce, and right now that workforce is predicted to fall far short of what's needed for the things that are happening. And that workforce has to go up and down the chain, you know, from engineers down to technicians, down to everybody who participates, as well as further developments for all of the different companies and organizations that are part of the supply chain. So that's a really big piece of what's going on now. Congress recently passed, I forget the exact name of it, I think it's the Frontiers Act. Somebody may have heard of it. That's been a very recent thing, but they're looking to invest $100 billion in order to help develop tech hubs around the country, and technologies, part of which will be in these space-type activities. So what I wanted to do today was just sort of share a little bit about, we are in the middle of a rapid amount of change in space activities and how they become part of our life. We already depend on them even more than we know, but they're undergoing a revolution. And so being part of that revolution is also going to enable some of the really cool exploratory parts, like the spacecraft Perseverance being on Mars. So that's, you know, a little bit, that's it, that's the last one. This just has to do with the Purdue mission. Any questions? Yeah.
So this itself, what's in there is one of the satellites that they put up there.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, we always think of these satellites as being these big, gigantic things. In numbers, how does this compare to the number of big satellite things?
So we're changing from those big satellites, those really large ones that may be $1 billion. We can put that little guy up and I can control that with a cell phone. Or I can get information from it with a cell phone. So that's a whole change in how this is going to work. And that is, you know, because I have my plexiglass around it, that's a little bigger than what those are. Now I also take some of those though, and I can make larger satellites out of them. So this is called a unit. And I can put 12 of those together and I have a 12U satellite, which has a little more capability. But that's been a very key development. And so, will there still be some big satellites? Probably. But these can also then, you know, you put a bunch of them up together, they can reconfigure, and they can get different kinds of information.
How many of these satellites that are up there are still working? I mean, how many are not working, I guess?
It depends. Each one has a certain lifetime. And so it depends. When they stop working, of course, that's a debris problem for the ones that are around the near Earth space. And so one of the goals in developing all of this is to have, you know, ways that you can service them so they'll stay working. These little guys, they're trying to put some regulations in space. So when your little one stops working, if it falls back into the atmosphere, it'll burn up. That's one way to keep it from being debris. Or have some way that you can regulate. If somebody puts one up, they have to have a plan for how they're going to deorbit it if it doesn't work anymore. These are so inexpensive, you probably aren't going to service these. So you're going to service the ones that are a little more functional and have more capabilities.
So if I build one of these, how much is it going to cost me to get on one of those things to get it up there?
So it depends. So for example, NASA's interested in promoting students learning about these. So NASA will give rides. Some of the other companies, the cost that they will do the planning and they'll do all of those kinds of things. Actually, that's not the hardest part. The hardest part actually for these little ones is making sure that they are space hardened. So once you go into that environment is very, very different than on Earth, you know. So for example, you may be at minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And so all the functioning parts have to be space hardened. That's really the hardest part right there.
So once Jerry builds his satellite repair shop up there, we can just send him over there?
Yes.
Good.
Artemis has a goal of being back on the moon by the end of 2024. Realistically, when do you think it will be? That seems to be a very aggressive goal.
That is very aggressive. Myself personally, and I know you're recording this.
Want me to shut it off?
probably 26 is probably the earliest. Now, it's also true that they've been working like crazy through the pandemic, but for a while they couldn't do all the testing they wanted and everything, so that's a contributing factor. But they really want to get there as fast as they can, because again, no longer are we the only ones there. I was listening to a talk the other day, which is pretty interesting, about where everybody wants to go on the moon is about the same spot, right? So there's certain spots that are attractive. So there was some discussion about, whether they're our friends or not, just like you do with the airlines, we're going to have to start talking to them because everybody wants to go to the same spot that makes sure nobody collides with each other and things like that. So we're not the only ones trying to get there. And I think that's motivating for us. It's also developing some new relationships that we hadn't had before. It's also offering other parts of the world the chance to be engaged. And for some countries that have not done that before, it offers, a new industry, the jobs, it offers participation, and it also offers an upgrade in education.
Is the Cislunar environment a lot harsher than near Earth environment as far as asteroids and things floating around out there?
It is different. And it has some advantages. For example, if you're really close around the Earth, you have the atmosphere, which causes a drag. So I don't have to worry about that. On the other hand, I do not have instantaneous communication like I do in near Earth. So once I get out a certain distance, even my communication from satellite to satellite, I have to take that into account. And so that's, some new technologies are developing in order to handle that kind of thing. It's also true that we need new kinds of observation satellites. So from Earth, I have tracking from the Earth. So I've got tracking antennas and so on. Well, it turns out if you get further out, they can't see very well. So they're now looking at what kind of tracking networks do we have to have? We're going to have them either on the moon, or they're going to have to be satellites out there that I can track what's happening in that area. So how do I do that? When it was I'm just going to go out and back really fast, it wasn't as compelling that I needed that kind of thinking about it differently. Plus side, you're thinking about all those kinds of things differently. I think not just me. But, can we use some of the little ones in order to help us do that? So right now, starting in November, a big NASA mission is going to launch, but it's also launching 13 of these little guys in order to do some experiments related to those other tasks. So some of them are going to go to the moon, they're going to collect information there and so on. So they're basically going to take, so that the NASA one that's preparing for the human mission in a couple of years, they're going to fling those off, which means that they can go to the moon, these little ones, and we have to be able to communicate with them and bring their data back and things like that. So, and they're looking at that exact thing that you're talking about right now in order to, but they have to have it ready by November.
So what's happening on the dark side of the moon?
Well, see, we don't know. The Space Force is quite interested in that. So they're trying to figure out how are you going to survey this entire region? And that's a reasonable question. And so that they're looking at some of the same things for those kinds of reasons. So there's activities going on there. Sure.
I got a question. First of all, I want to thank you for being our program today. You did an excellent job, very informative in education. I get this area that's around the Earth is the near Earth area, and from there to the moon is called Cislunar, and after that is the translunar. I lack of education on this subject, but why'd you come up with the word Cislunar and translunar?
Well, cis just sort of means like inside. Now, to be honest, it's a language that is developing. So anytime that you have a new industry, the language develops along with what you're learning about. So that's the current terminology that's out there in all of these different groups. And that's the one that we use. But in 5 years, it could be different because the language is developing as we go. So inside the Earth's orbit, or inside the moon's orbit versus outside. And, you know, I guess back in the 70s, it was all called the Earth News Neighborhood, for example. I think the Space Force has introduced the words ex-geo, but that's like, nobody knows what that means, so. I don't think that's catching on real fast.
They got to justify their budget.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's got a symbol too, so that was.
Anybody else? Okay, Dr. Howell, thank you so much for coming and visiting with us. Thank you. We really appreciate you being here and talking about all this. Very, very interesting. I know Jerry could probably spend about 4 or 5 hours with you, or days, and I know I can spend a ton with you too. So thanks again for coming out and visiting with us.
Thank you all for listening.
Thanks.